Okay, I will start to set the scene a little bit for this session. Let me see. By going into the policy framework. So what are the boundary conditions for a carbon neutral society from a political point of view? And I will also give a short introduction to ETN's technical working groups. So first, ETN, just 2 slides about ETN. So ETN is a turbine machinery association that brings together all the stakeholders around gas turbine technology. And the objective there is really to cooperate, find ways to increase exchange of information and start cooperation on the critical topics. Within ETN, we have 3 pillars. One is addressing market trends, policy legislation. So what is the framework from that point of view? Then we have another pillar that we are addressing technical issues and optimized operations. So how can we ensure high reliability and availability of the gas turbine? And finally, we're trying to see what kind of research and development is required in order to meet the requirements of the user community. And then we try to see how we can accelerate this by working together in working groups and projects. The vision of ETN is to create safe, secure, affordable, carbon-neutral turbine machinery-based energy solution by 2030 that are widely and globally implemented by 2050. And the mission to do that is this, just like what I talked about before, encourage and facilitate information exchange that can accelerate a development process of this technology. So, looking ahead for the market trends, we heard this morning in the keynote session about the 3 Ds, decarbonization, decentralization, and digitalization. And these are part of, I think, all the user community's strategies. And they are very much interconnected as well. When it comes to the climate change, about a year ago, we had the IPCC report that came out that showcased the incredibly steep carbon emission reduction curve that is required by 2055 or 2040 in order to be in line with the Paris Agreement. The problem here is that we are still increasing emissions. So we haven't reached the peak yet. And as a result, this has resulted in demonstrations around the world by students, not only in Europe, but all over the world, led by Greta Thunberg, a Swedish student. So the pressure to decarbonize is increasing. In Europe, this has led to a coal phase-out plan. And here you can see in green where there's already been commitment and where there have been a decision to phase out coal by a certain date. The blue one is showing where they are still discussing it, and the orange have not yet decided. But the pressure, as I said, is building up. Not only from the policy, from the individual countries, but also from the EU, because no capacity payment for carbon-intensive generation if you have above 550 grams CO2 per kilowatt hour. Also, the economics is no longer being as good as it used to be. So Euroactiv just recently in October came out and with a statement that 79% of coal plants are unprofitable. Now you can argue about these numbers is completely correct because sometimes there are long-term deals and so on that they couldn't get access to, but in any case you see the trend. Another contributor to not making it economically is the EU emission trading scheme. So the price of carbon has come up to a higher level than before. And on this graph, you can see the trigger when it is actually economically viable to change from coal to gas. So on the red line here, you see the price of carbon, and on the light gray, you see the price if you have a combined cycle gas turbine with a 60% efficiency, and on the dark gray, you see a single cycle gas turbine with efficiency of about 40%. So you can see that in both cases, it makes economic sense to change towards gas. The other thing that comes into play is the individual taxes in the individual countries. So you can see here on the left side the difference in price on carbon taxes, which also are adding up, of course, giving incentives for more cleaner power generation. Looking into the 2030 policy and energy and climate policy, the new legislative framework that came out earlier this year is that greenhouse gas emissions should be reduced by 40% by 2030, and renewable energy should increase to 32%. So an enormous amount more of intermittent renewable power needs to be put into the grid. These are ambitious targets, but the new commission that is coming into place, which is now just being formed in Brussels, want more, and they have already indicated that they want higher targets. So they're talking about 50 to 55% reduction of greenhouse gas emission in the so-called new Green Deal that's under development. This Green Deal is showcasing the objective to become the first carbon neutral continent in the world. And it is the newly elected president, Ms. von der Leyen, who has promised that we will have a Green Deal in place by 2020. So what does this mean? Well, it means that we will have a deal on carbon neutrality by 2050. We will have more ambitious greenhouse gas emissions reductions by 2030, as we saw on the slide before, going up to 50-55. And there will be an EU carbon border tax to avoid this, that companies are moving production elsewhere outside the European border. There's been a lot of statements actually lately coming out from this upcoming commission, and that have been in favor actually for the gas turbine industry. The new commissioner designated for energy, Kadri Simson, she said gas will have a role to play in the transition towards a carbon neutral economy, notably through carbon capture and storage in the longer term. And Frans Timmermans, who is going to be the executive vice president for the European Green Deal and climate action, he said that hydrogen could be a huge opportunity for our economy. So the important thing is that they're starting to see how gas turbines and gas can help in the energy transition to meet the targets required, and how we can use hydrogen as a wave breaker to open up for carbon neutral solutions. So what is all this talk about hydrogen? Why is it so interesting? Well, because it has a lot of possibilities with it. You can use it to compensate the intermittency of renewable generation. You can use it to transport hydrogen, and you can use it also for storage. And the interesting thing is that it can be used to decarbonize a lot of different industries. Transportation, heavy industries, industrial industries like chemical, paper, etc., that demands a lot of power and heat, and also serve as a feedstock for renewable. However, the issue here is, of course, that if you look at the total production of hydrogen in Europe, it's about 7 million tons today. So just as an example, I just wanted to highlight here, if you take a 600 megawatt plant running with 60% efficiency, then it will consume 0.21 million tons a year of hydrogen. So only one plant of this size will grow the production demand with 3%. So the reason I want to show that is that just going with so-called green hydrogen is most likely not going to be possible. We need also what we call blue hydrogen, so hydrogen that are created from gas and with CCS on top of it. We'll hear more about that from the speakers after me. So I will not go into the details here. But this showcases how a hydrogen society could look like based on sector coupling. Okay, however, to reach that, there's a lot of research that still is required. And that's why I just wanted to highlight what we're doing in ETN. So in ETN, we have asked the user community, we have asked the OEMs and the research community, what are the key topics that we need to focus on in order to meet this vision? And then we have done an R&D recommendation report. You can download it from our websites. It's open to anyone. And I just wanted to highlight some of the key things in this priorities development for gas turbine technology. First one, extended fuel spectrum. So extended fuel spectrum to hydrogen, to ammonia. Ammonia is interesting because of this, it's easier to store and transport. Biomass. Increased operational flexibility within the emission regulations. Power to X. Future concept cycles. Supercritical cycles, wet cycles. And of course, with all of this, we have to look at also future materials if we are increasing the temperature and so on. And then additive manufacturing is also something we need to work on. Digitalization, condition monitoring and lifing. This is very interesting and important when you are running your gas turbine with many starts and stops. So what is the lifetime consumption of that? So within ETN, we have asked, all these stakeholders are contributing with expertise in different dynamic technical committees. Low carbon gas turbine operations, operational and fuel flexibility, material degradation repair technologies, condition monitoring and asset management. So these are all reflecting the need, the interest of the community. We then have a number of working groups. I will not go into detail of them because some of the panelists here will talk more about them in their presentations. But we have one on hydrogen that recently started up where we are trying to identify all the potential barriers against hydrogen, and then we highlight the ones that we can't really do anything about, and then we are focusing on the technical things where we can help each other to accelerate the development. Additive manufacturing is also an important thing to see, how we can use this technology to do things that wasn't possible before. And as you will hear also later on, additive manufacturing will have a role to play in hydrogen development. Another important working group is air filtration. Especially if you're operating in areas where you have really bad bad conditions, either from pollution or in a harsh environment in coastal areas. And that has a huge impact on the reliability of the gas turbine. So what we have been doing there, we have developed an ETN standard that we are taking into an ISO standard with the objective to increasing the lower level, let's say, of air filtration systems to increase them to become better than they are, even better than they are today. We also, another working groups on exhaust systems. It came to our attention from the user community that there were some issues with exhaust systems. So we have developed there also an ISO standard, well, an ETN standard first, and this is now being taken into an ISO standard probably in the beginning of next year. Another one is a micro gas turbine working group where we are exploring market opportunities and solutions to see how we can maybe get this technology also to take off. And interesting enough, we have some presentations also from the users community that are using already micro turbines, but we know that still there is an issue to get down the price on the micro turbine technology. So that just to summarize my presentation, if we look at the market trends and opportunities for gas turbine technology, we see stricter climate legislation in place to prevent high polluting solutions. So this is phasing out coal plants and it's phasing out nuclear. And replacement capacity opportunities, of course, are there for our community. The increasing CO2 price trend on the ETS system and CO2 taxes is also make it more interesting to work on efficiency and low carbon energy solutions. And then fast growing intermittent renewable power, which will be we see a high, much more intermittent renewable power coming in by 2030. Then you have balancing and power to X opportunities. At the same time, also energy demand is increasing. 2.1% increase in 2018, and IEA is estimating, for example, a global demand for gas will grow by 1.5% up to 2040. So, and then finally, large investment in new pipelines and LNG facilities in Europe, also in other areas of the world. And LNG is also a very interesting thing that is being, we see more and more LNG import facilities being set up.